So we've just got a custom order come through the site from Luke, and he's put together actually probably what we call the sweet spot build. Everything is just about right, not too much, not too little. So I'm really excited to bring this one to you, so let's build. All right, so first up is this case, and this is the Corsair 3000D. It got slagged off by a lot of people, but actually I think this is brilliant. It's got decent build quality, looks really nice, everything's going to fit that we need. I think this is absolutely brilliant. You're missing out on top 360mm cooler support, but for a mid-range build or higher mid-range, you're not going to need 360 at the top, so I think this is going to be perfect. You can get the plain version or you can get the RGB version. So this RGB version comes with 3 ARGB fans in the front. Usually I would get a Corsair case without them and put my own in, but actually the fans that they give you here will hook up to a regular 5V ARGB instead of needing a Corsair hub, so why not just go for the one that comes with the RGB fans included. That's what we've done here. Glass side panel screws are captive, unscrew, slide forward, off you come. Good action, like the build quality. The front bit, this will also pop off, but we don't need to, the fan's already built in, we're just going to leave it, unless the fan routing is poor, and it's not. They've actually done a really good job of hiding the cables in here. So we're going to leave the front alone, swing around to the back panel. Again, captive screws on the back, lean forward, take off, easy. There you go. And we can see in the back here, pretty well laid out. Got a nice cable routing channel down the side. It's not as good as some other cases, but it's good enough. Take off the twist ties, get everything as free as possible to start with. Lots of people forget to take out the little foam piece that's here. So take that out. That's just for shipping damage, etc. So we just get rid of that. Then you'll find all of your documents and bits and bobs in the bottom here, including the screw box. Take that out, get that out of the way. Get everything shelled as much as possible. If you're going to use a front radiator in here, then leave the hard drive cage where it is. If you're not going to use one, we're going to move it to the next slot, which is a bit further forward. Going to give us more room to stuff our cables from our power supply. There's a couple of thumb screws to undo here. You pull forward to unhook it. Sometimes have to move the glob of cables out of the way, and you should just be able to slide it in. Take a little bit of finding the right position, but it should go in nicely, and just secure the thumb screws again. Again, just want to undo all the twist ties from your cables. And there we go, looking good, ready to chuck some stuff in. So seeing as you've got the case up here, why don't we get the power supply ready next? Hey guys, power supply is MSI A850GL PCIe 5. All right, and here's the unit. It's obviously modular. Modular means that you've got to plug all your own cables into the back. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It doesn't really matter, but usually the good ones do tend to be modular just by happenstance. So with the power supplies, guys, I'm not really aligned to this one in particular. I just get any of the decent 850 watt golds. There seems to be a little rotation. You know, some weeks the RM850E from Corsair is going to be around 90 quid. This week, this one was about 90 quid. You know, there's loads of rotations of ones. There's deep cool gold ones that go for about 90 quid sometimes. So just get a good 850 watt gold that's around 90 quid and you're going to be absolutely fine. But in truth, guys, you could save even more money if you wanted on this build by going with a 750 watt bronze. You'd be absolutely fine. But what you get with an 850 is that ability to upgrade in the future to more powerful stuff, because the only thing you're not going to be powering with this is an RTX 4090. And even with a 4090, you'd probably get away with it if you're using a low-powered CPU. Okay guys, and like we said, because this is modular, you're going to need to plug your own cables in here. So in all conventional cases, really, your power supply is going to be down in the bottom corner here. There might be some other weird places for it, but in this case, it goes here. So you just take it with your fan facing down, your cables facing backwards, chuck it in the case like that, and slide it over. There you go. And then on the rear of the case, all you do is just you line it up so that you get the little screw holes point through here, and you can easily fix those in place. A little build tip that I like to do to make things a bit easier later is to find the cable that is for your CPU, separate it from all the other cables, and then I want to pre-route this through the top corner here. Okay, so we're going to pop that through and just pull all the slack through. It's going to be much easier when you put your motherboard in if you've done this beforehand. All right, and the final bit of prep that we need to do on the case before we can build the rest is to put a case fan on the rear. So we've got this Antec Infinity, and we're going to pop that in this slot here. Securing the fan's pretty easy. I always have it so that the cables are sticking out this way and that's going to give us the most slack and best routing options for the neatest build. And then I like to sit this as low as possible in the slots. I think that's going to look the best. It's going to give us the most room on top to fit our other components as well. The other one, you just get your screwdriver, use the screws that come included with the fan that you've got, and just secure it in place. Just do your opposite corners first. So done a bottom left corner, we'll now do the top right. So our case prep is actually done now. So we can just move the case out of the way somewhere and we can move on with the next piece. Okay, so your motherboard will actually come in a bag like this. Anti-static protection bag. All you do, flip it over, open it up. And then what you can do is use the box as a little table. You can put the anti-static board there as well if you want, and then you've got a little platform that you can use. The first thing I tend to put in is the NVMe SSD, so let's do that. We're going to be using a Kingston KC3000, really nice drive this. This is a proper premium PCIe 4 drive, but the pricing's really good. You don't need Samsung or anything like that. It's not going to be realistically any faster than this in day-to-day use. This is absolutely ideal. 2 terabyte capacity, plenty of room for all your stuff, absolutely brilliant. So this board has these cool little poppers which you can use to undo everything. So we'll zoom in on those. So we're just gonna pop that off, give it a pull. And you see it gives you a little piece here, and that's gonna then allow you to put your SSD in. Take your SSD, which has little fingers there, they line up with the same shape on the slot. You just pop it in like so. Rest it down so it sits over a little hole, and you just put the little plunger in, and that's just going to hold that SSD in place. This is a pretty cool system. If your motherboard doesn't have these little popper type things, all you do is you usually get a little screw and then screw that on, and that's going to hold it in place. Pretty nice. Now, because this is a nice drive, the alternative place to put it is up here. So it's up to you what you want to do with it. The benefit of putting it here, lower down, is that you can easily add another one here in future up high, but the downside is there's no heatsink, so you're not going to get as good performance from your SSD. So actually, we're going to put it in the top one. So what you need for this one is a Phillips number 1 screwdriver. It's a bit smaller than a standard number 2. And with these ones, you just lift and pull, like that. This has a little heatsink sticker, so we need to make sure we take that off. Otherwise, you're not going to get the full use of your thermal pad. And this one actually is a screw down type one here, okay? So let's pop that in to the slot, the same as we did before. Line it up with the little hole there. And then you need to use the little screw that comes included in your motherboard in a separate bag. And you're just going to use that just to hold this in place. When using a screwdriver, it's quite good if you put another finger at the end of the screwdriver. It keeps it much more stable. Little tip, and then you can just screw it into place there. So that's now secure. We've already taken the little peely bit off the heatsink, so now all we need to do is put it back. Usually it has some writing on it, like this one says M2 SSD, so make sure that's the right way round. And just slot it in on the right hand side. And then sort of line it up on the left, hold it in place, and then you can use your screwdriver just to keep that nicely secured down until it's tight. You might see me have a second one in here. That's just a test drive that I have all the games on that I like to test with. So basically, for the rest of it, ignore that there's another one down here. So our next component to consider is going to be our DRAM, as we call it, or system memory, or just RAM sometimes, whatever you want to call it. This is sort of like really short-term storage for your PC, keeps things running nice and smooth. We've gone with ADATA Lancer Blade. So this is 16 by 2, 32 gigs total. But the great thing about this one is it's 6,000 megahertz speed at CL30, so it's a really good sweet spot where you're not spending too much on stupid RAM that you're not going to be able to get the most out of, but equally you're getting something that's pretty fast and going to keep up in future. And it's also got a bit of RGB. You can get non-RGB ones for about £5 or £10 less. These will go in the RAM slots, or DIMM slots as they're called. You need to put it in slots 2 and 4 to start with if you've only got 2 sticks. That's going to get you the best performance, and then you're just going to flick off the corresponding little toggles on each side to allow the new stick to go in. And then you might notice that on these there's a little divot in the middle here, and that divot lines up with the little post in the middle, and it's not even, so you have to make sure you put it in the right way. It'll only let you do it one way, so what you can do is you can just put it in, start at a diagonal, line up the 2 edges, and then turn and then put it in. And if it lets you pop in like that, you're all good. If you're getting a lot of resistance and nothing's moving, don't force it, you've probably got it the wrong way around. So let me show you doing it the wrong way. So if we take our DDR5 stick here, do the same thing, and then rock and rotate into the slot. If I push here, I can feel that it's uneven. It's not slotting in place, and that means that it's the wrong way around. If I force it, I'm going to break it. And you can also see that the XPG is the wrong way around as well. So let's pick that up, spin it around, and we're going to pop it in the correct way. So line it up, tilt, place, push. And you should hear the pop on both sides. You should see that the latches have popped up. So next up is the CPU. And we have here the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. This is absolutely still the sweet spot, even with the 9000 series out. The pricing on this is so good. It's between 310 and 350 quid. These are brilliant. They'll probably start to wind down production pretty soon after this video goes out, so the prices might go up. But then you should have the 9800X3D coming out afterwards, which would be a slot-in replacement for this one anyway. But this is an absolutely brilliant CPU. I have it on my own PC. I think it's absolutely awesome. So let's get this unboxed and put inside. So you've got a little plastic caddy here, and you need to take this CPU out in order to use it. So you open up, and I always grab the sides of the CPU. Try not to touch the bottom if you can, or the top. Try and touch the sides as much as possible. We can put this to the side, and then we need to release the socket. So there's a little arm on the side here, which I'll zoom in to help you see. So you push and then pull out a bit as you're pushing. That releases the lever, opens it up, and then you just need to lift the socket up like this. And you need to be really careful now because there's lots of little pins in here. If you bend them, you're in deep trouble. You'd need a new motherboard. So now that that's up, we're going to place our CPU inside. It's easy to place these because the writing should be the correct way up, okay? So the writing should always look like this. And it's got little notches on it, so you should only be able to put it in the correct way anyway. But just go with the writing, you're going to be seen right there. And you just very, very gently put it in place. Give it a very gentle wiggle just to make sure that it's seated correctly, feels nice and snug, so we're good. We're going to push the little cover down like this, and then you're going to take the lever, you're going to push it up, and it's going to be a firm push down, and then hook it around that little hook in the corner. There you go. This bit should pop off. If it doesn't, you sometimes need to just wiggle it. Don't throw this piece of plastic away. Always keep it in case you need to sell your motherboard, send it on, because it's going to protect the socket on those delicate pins that we just talked about. So keep this somewhere safe. So CPU is now in place. The final thing that we need to do on the motherboard is fit the liquid cooler. And that's actually probably the most difficult part of the PC build in total. So cooler wise, I've gone for the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3. Really good value, really good performance, and looks really nice as well. You could also get something like the Thermalright Frozen Knot, a little bit cheaper, also really good, but this is an awesome cooler and it's going to serve you well for this and any other additional CPUs that you install in the future. So let's get this open, let's get it installed. So this is the liquid cooler, the Arctic Freezer 3, and it's a bit more complicated even than a regular water cooler because there's a few extra steps, but you just follow the instructions on the website and it's usually not too bad to do, all right? So let's do it piece by piece and we'll get there. So firstly, let's hook up our cable that's going to help us hook it up to the motherboard to control the speed. So there's two different cables. There's actually one like this, that it all goes just into one cable here that you put in your motherboard. That's what we're going to use today, but there is another one that lets you control different elements of it separately, such as the pump and the various fans and things. But let's just keep it simple. Let's just go with one cable like this. Now on the side of the pump head piece, you see there's this little sort of beige cutout, and that's going to line up with the plug for the fan cable, right? So let's hook that up. So there we go, cable in place. This is a little black sticker that says please peel off. So let's take that off, peel off. And it's now time to prepare the socket to be able to accept the liquid cooler. So we've got to take off the 4 screws in the corners. These are the little support bracket pieces that are around the CPU. There we go, we take off the stock mounting hardware like this, because we don't need those. So now that that's off, we can put in the bracket that's going to hold it in place. You want the little bag that's got the AMD marks on it. You're going to place the 4 plastic spacers on each corner, and that's just going to elevate things, make it a bit easier to get everything in place. Then you're going to take your little plates. These are conveniently marked with an R and an L, so you can actually hook them up the correct way around. So that's the right ones, that goes on the right. So just place that down on top. Now there's nothing really to hold this in place until we put the screws in, so that's why it might not stay in place perfectly. So we've got our right hand one. We'll take a screw from the same bag that you got the spacers from, which is the AMD bag, and then you're just going to gently place this through here. Try and line it up. It can be quite fiddly. Once you've got it in place, just give it a few turns, but don't fully tighten it. And then you can readjust, put that one back over there, take another screw, and that's just going to make things much easier to set up. And now you can fully tighten this one, and then go back, do the same on the other side there. The other way to make it a bit easier is to take your plate and then pre-feed the screw through the hole. 1, 2. So that you've pre-fed the screws, and you can just descend them in like this. And you can hold that plate in place and secure them down. Up to you which way you do it. I think the first method's probably a bit cleaner, but it doesn't really matter. Whatever you want to do is fine. Again, don't fully tighten the one side until we're sure that we can get the other one in place. And then you can, once you've done this side, you can then go back and fully tighten the other side there. There we go. Next is time to use the included thermal paste here. Is pop the cap off, and then probably the easiest thing to do is just to put a pea-sized amount in the middle. When I talk about a pea-sized, I mean a garden pea, not a petit pois, and then that's going to be enough. Don't worry about having too much or too little. If anything, I would err on the side of giving a bit too much, because it's not going to affect temperatures that much. Now, if we turn our attention to the pump head again, on the bottom we've got this little warning sticker that says to peel it off before, so let's peel that off, otherwise you're going to definitely get worse temperatures. And now actually comes time to put that pump head onto the CPU, so let's do it. You want to line it up so that the tubes on this cooler are facing the bottom. So you can see the tubes here at the bottom side. So the easiest way is to hold it from the top like this. And then what you want is these grey bits here to line up with the middle of those metal pieces that we had before, okay? So we're going to gently place that over the top, line them up, and then we'll change the camera angle so that you can see what we're doing a bit better. So with that in place, you can see that we need to line up this screw with the socket. So I'm going to line that up. We're just going to place it over the top, and we're just going to do just a couple of turns. Don't do this fully, and then we'll dance over to the other side, repeat the process and come back. Just a couple of turns, and then you just want to go back and forth. Back and forth, okay? So you don't want to fully tighten one side, because that's going to distribute the pressure unevenly, so you just do a couple of twists, bounce between them, until it's fully snug. And this can take quite a few turns sometimes. You can feel the resistance is starting to increase, so we're probably close to the end. So the right one is locked. Hopefully now this one, yeah, and that locked at that point. You could force it, but you really shouldn't. Once it gets tight enough that it's really hard to pull, then that's the point where you can stop. So that's now the pump head hooked up. I know it looks a bit ugly. That's because we haven't put the fancy cap on the top, but that's easily done. You might have also noticed that it looks like the cooler is too low on the CPU. It looks like you're exposing a big bit at the top, but that's actually intentional by the designers, okay? And that's absolutely no problem. All of the heat is going to be generated right in the center of the CPU, or the majority of the heat is, and this cooler is designed to get the heat out of that spot the most. So don't worry if there's a tiny bit poking out at the top like that. Okay, and just to show you what it's going to look like at the end, we've actually got the headpiece here, right? So that's the RGB element, and all you do is you literally just stick it over the top. Really easy to do. You just clunk it into place, and look, that's now secure. So that's what it's going to look like at the end, but you could just leave this off for now if you wanted, because it might get knocked off when you move things around, but it's just to show you that that's not what your cooler is actually going to look like at the end of it. Okay, so we're back to the case now. We're going to put everything inside. One thing to note though is, don't forget the fan cables that we had installed from earlier. We need to route those around. So let's pop those up through the top left corner. get those out of the way so they don't get trapped when we put our motherboard in place. So now what we're going to do is we're going to descend the motherboard into the case like this. And the liquid cooler, we'll just sort of put it down by the side there. And that's just going to be a resting place for a moment while I move everything across. Now what you can do to make things a bit easier is hook up this CPU power cable now. So let's do that. And then once that's hooked up, you can just slide over to the side. And let's try and get everything to line up. This is a bit more difficult because I've got it tilted up at an angle so that I can film it, but if you had this down flat, it shouldn't slide like that. This is the last chance to make sure that there's no cables trapped underneath before we screw it down. So you're going to use the screws with the little hats on them, and then you're just going to screw it down. So you need to line up all the little holes on here with the posts, the little standoffs that are in the case. So you do that. I always try to put the center screw in first. That's probably the most important one, so let's get that in. And then we can go about placing the others. Okay, and there are a few other little bits and bobs to hook up, which is going to be really difficult to show, so I'm just going to hook those up now. But essentially, it's the 5V ARGB and the PWM. We're going to put those in place now, get it out of the way. We also take this opportunity to put the rear fan plug in as well, so we're going to hook that up over the top. Okay, and that's quite a lot of this bit done. Just got to put the radiator up at the top, so let's do that. Take the pipes. And then before we put it in place, we're just going to take some of the slack of these cables here, just feed them through the hole at the back. That's just going to allow us to go with some neater cable management at the end. So those are all folded back. If there's anything else at the top here that you need to plug in, it's a good idea to do it now, but let's get this hooked up. So that just goes in here, and that's just going to sit nice and flush there. And we're going to show you the top-down view so that we can screw it in place. So technically you're supposed to use these tiny little washers here, and then a screw, and that's going to give you the most secure contact to the top. You can actually get away without using the washer if you want to, but for completeness, we will today. So whilst holding the radiator in place on the top, we can use the screws to hold it down. I like to try and put it as far to the front of the case as possible. It takes most of the slack out of the liquid cooler pipes, makes it look a lot nicer. So I'll hold that back as far as it'll go there. Screw that down. So that's in one corner. We're still holding onto the radiator underneath. And we just screw down the opposite corner like this. Good. And then sometimes you just need to loosen a tiny bit, readjust just to ensure that all the other screws are going to be able to be put down. And there we go. So that is secure, but let's put in all the rest of the screws for completeness sake. Okay, now we need to hook up all the motherboard cables, and in the interests of brevity, let's just get that done quickly. Okay, and for the fun part now is the Radeon RX 7800 XT 16 gigs XFS Swift 210, the cheapest one I could find, because guys, for these mid-range things, you just don't need the really expensive ones. This one's going to be fine. It'll give you brilliant performance, 1080p, 1440p, and even 4K, depending on the game. Pretty good. Don't forget to always take all the plastic off these, otherwise it's going to be really cooking. Alright, let's take out those slat covers. Okay, place the graphics card in, lining up the gold finger with the socket. Clunk. Hold the card up while you screw it in. Okay, so we've fed the cables up through the bottom. Now what we're going to do is hook them up. Match the notch on here to the top notch on there. Feed all the slack down to keep that looking nice and taut. We can fold these bits behind, like so. Get it looking neat, and then we can hook that with a cable tie. Okay, we can now Put on the pump head, release the aesthetic piece of that. That should just clunk on. Now ostensibly this side is now done. I just got to go around and tidy up all the cables. I'm not going to subject it to that, so let's see the end result. Okay, so cable management complete. Let's pop the side panels on, see how we did.
This build reminds me of your mum. Not the best looking out there, but still a sight for sore eyes. Ticks all the boxes and is excellent value for money. The 7800 XT and Ryzen 7 7800X 3D, try saying that 3 times fast, are a beautifully matched pair for 1440p and 4K gaming. Nowadays, you would slip in the 9800X 3D, of course, as the newer option. And what's more is this pair is built for longevity. You have 16GB of VRAM on the graphics card, and that's going to give you plenty of breathing room into the future. And the AM5 platform is going to guarantee you slot-in CPU upgrades for at least a couple more generations. But how about the case? The Corsair 3000D got a bit of a lukewarm reception when it released. I don't actually remember seeing any reviews at all. I think, actually, guys, that's a bit harsh. It's decently priced, it looks nice, the build quality is good enough. It's very refreshing in a time where, guys, let's be real, Corsair, they're overcharging for pretty average gear. The only downside in this one is cable management isn't as easy. There's not as many tie-down points, and there's no top 360mm cooler support, which I think is probably needed for most modern systems. We were able to fit the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 in the top, which actually is a bit of a win, guys, because those Arctic AIOs, they have thicker radiators than most. Personally, I would never use this cooler in my own build, but it's only for one really stupid reason. I think the coolant pipes, they get all crimped and they look really ugly to me. And let me say this, I'm going to blow a few minds in the audience now, guys. Liquid cooling is just for looks. Let's face it, unless you're a mad overclocker, it just isn't needed. So if I don't like how a liquid cooler looks, I would feel like I've completely wasted my money on it, because it's actually, in truth, not going to be any better than a tower air cooler, particularly if you're only on a Ryzen 7 rather than a Ryzen 9. It's a bit better, this one, than the Liquid Freezer 2 in terms of looks, but still a bit of an ick for me, so I'm not going to do it. I must say that the pump head aesthetics, though, they've improved those a lot. They look a heck of a lot better, so credit where it's due. This bit looks really nice. And in the spirit of being fair, guys, a lot of people really like the design, so maybe I'm the idiot here. It was refreshing to find a customer that actually asked for a Radeon graphics card. I think this must be the second time ever, and I've built hundreds and hundreds of PCs. I've said it many times on the channel, guys, I usually just use NVIDIA for all the systems I want to sell to the public, because the truth is they're going to sell much faster, even though the value is often worse. I could lecture people all day telling them that Radeon would be better value and you wouldn't even notice, but you know what that would achieve? A lot of wasted time, and at the end of the day, no sale. I can't fault this cheaper XFX card either. It really did the job with no fuss. It had some sag on it, but that's easily fixed with a £10 stand. But I suspect the motherboard had a part to play in that, because it doesn't have any of that metallic armour on the PCIe slot, which does tend to help with sag, at least a little bit. Now, if you've made it to this point of the video, you're probably a real fan, so why don't you put a little emoji of a croissant in the comments? For no other reason, but just to confuse passers-by. All right, that's the video. Bye.